Good afternoon. My name is Yossi Vardi.
And I'm David Tennenhouse.
For those of you who don't know David, at the end of the day, after all the VCs and the lawyers and the consumers, etc., Silicon Valley started and still is depending on core of exceptional, great engineers, people which know how to take molecules and atoms and bits and mix them together and create something which create computers, networks, devices, semiconductor, etc. And David is definitely one of the pillars of this industry. David, can you share with us very quickly like the main milestones of your career, and please don't be shy.
It's hard to be shy in front of all of your Israeli friends. Let's see, I'm Chief Research Officer at VMware now, so I'm now back as a researcher, technologist. I think of it as now earning an honest living. And I guess Yossi would as well. I spent time as a VC. I spent time in government, and prior to that, as a research executive at Intel, as a CEO of Amazon's A9 search subsidiary, and time going way back as a researcher at MIT, studying networking and computing systems.
When you say government, what have you done in the government? You have a microphone, actually.
Oh yeah, I don't need your microphone.
Okay. So what were you doing in government?
Well, there was this wireless technology. Now we have microphones, so I don't need yours. I was leading the information technology office at DARPA, which was a really great privilege. It was kind of, as I said, often say to my bosses now, if you want somebody who can manage a development organization with 10,000 people, I am not the right person. If you want somebody that can spend $300 million a year with 10 people, I know how to do that.
So what kind of work you were done that you can tell us without the need that we will shoot you at the end of the session?
Let's see, it was a great time. We did work on data-intensive computing. That laid the groundwork for the way data centers are done today. We did work on what was then called next generation internet, work on something called active networks that actually built on some work I did at MIT. That's laid the groundwork for SDN. A lot of work on IoT. Something we really started at that time was a move from interactive computing, which is the paradigm we're still mostly in today, where people, we all interact with our computers and our laptops and our cell phones. But if you think about it, you don't want to interact with 1,000 computers, right? So we could already, back then see that we were going to have hundreds and thousands of computers per person, and we needed to get those networked and get to a point where instead of interacting with them, the computers would become proactive. They'd start anticipating our needs. So we started laying the groundwork for IoT and also for the machine learning and the technologies we need to start anticipating our needs. It's just phenomenal people that I had the opportunity to work with. This was not my doing. This was just I had the chance to really provide a little bit of leadership and sit back and enjoy.
We talk now late 90s.
We're talking now late, that was correct, late 90s.
And then in 2001, I think you moved to Intel.
Yeah, well, just a little before. Before. Yeah, I managed to get to Intel before the downturn. So that gave me a chance to get a research program established before the 2000 downturn. Of course, unfortunately, it meant my stock was, the strike price on my options was before the 2000 downturn.
Yeah. What was the stock price then and what is today?
I think, if I recall correctly, it was around the equivalent to about $37, $38 after you split adjust, something like that. And today, somebody else can look, but it's in the, high 40s? So it took a long, long time to get back.
But still, it's a terrific company, in spite of the... Seems to me that there is a disconnect sometimes between the price of the stock and the technology of a company.
Absolutely, right? And I think a lot has to do with the growth prospects, how well you're riding them, how well you're really positioned to be moving on to the next sort of wave. And Intel did, sort of miss one or two waves. But still, it's a great company.
Yeah, it's established an industry. You had any interactions with the famous Israelis which were in Intel?
Well, with a number of them. Some of the famous, some of the infamous. I'd put sort of Dadi in the category of the famous, and I won't mention.
That is Dadi Perlmutter.
Yes, absolutely, and I won't mention the infamous. But it was a very interesting time. I actually have a very clear memory of sitting. I'd sit outside of the cafeteria there in Haifa because the person I was sitting with was smoking, so we were kicked out. And he told me that they were really going to bet the whole Israeli subsidiary in terms of the design center on mobile computing. Yeah. And this was sort of back around 2001, as I recall.
Yeah, so when laptops began to take over, they developed the energy-saving chip with power management, etc.
Absolutely, and they really stuck to their beliefs. In other words, they knew they were on the right path. The first chip that they designed, actually got all the way to being taped out. It got all the way to being sampled. The company canceled that because the market really wasn't ready for that product. But they went right back in and did another one, Banyas, which was even better. They showed good Israeli stubbornness.
Yeah, and they didn't listen to the instruction of the bosses, right?
Right. Billions of dollars made through that stubbornness.
Yeah, and they couldn't care less what their bosses instructed them to do.
Well, I think it was more a matter of, they did care, but they went ahead and did the right thing. I remember sometimes coming back from trips to Israel and thinking, gee, I don't think the people in Santa Clara really know exactly how many people are on the payroll here.
How you compare the Israeli engineer to the American engineer?
Well, I think the better comparison is really perhaps to the Bay Area engineer. And there I think you see the love of technology, the entrepreneurism, you see some of that stubbornness. So I think there's actually a lot of commonality there. I think sometimes, and this has really changed for the better, if I go back to that time, I think that in many Israeli firms, people were overly cautious. They realized that they were sort of a small subsidiary in a small country, and so they should find some small piece that they could do and do well. And this really changed, right? So now you have the Israeli engineers taking the lead in these multinational companies.
Okay, from there, let's talk a few words about A9. You had a great vision for new search engines, and it was deployed, but not in the way that I think that you first foreseen it. But now Amazon is doing search of product all over the place. What can you?
Well, they're doing very well. Obviously, Amazon, another great company, and they're generally knocking it out of the park, with many innovations.
Did you keep some of the stock that you got, the stock option?
I'm not going to comment on that. Certainly not, of course, not the options. When you leave, usually the options expire, but there's a question.
It went, I think, from 8 to 1,500 or something like this.
Yeah. So not enough. Not enough. Never, But I have to say, I've always been actually, in that sense, just thrilled with the opportunities I've had. I'm actually an immigrant to the U.S. From Canada via Britain, and the country just gave me opportunity after opportunity. So, I'm thrilled to see all of my friends, do well, whether it's at A9, whether it's at Intel, wherever.
Want to make any personal comment about Jeff? The audience will love to hear your perspective.
No, I guess the only comments would be he has a tremendous, and this is again going back many years. He taught me, I think, a number of lessons. One of the first was just he would just look at the site through the customer's eyes. So this is when Amazon was really just all about the stores, and for each product, and we were at A9 responsible for search for Amazon. he wanted to know, how we were surfacing the results that would matter to the customer. So, what I learned from is just tremendous customer centricity. Of course, the other thing that I observed, not so much directly, but it was through being part of the broader family there, was Jeff would really stick with things till he got them right. When we were first, coming out with, not we, but the company was coming out with what became known as the Kindle, the first versions were not up to Jeff's standards, and so he basically delayed that project, the launch of that project. He was really willing to wait till he got it right. He didn't say, oh, you guys aren't quite meeting the mark, we're going to cut your funding. He grew the funding, he stuck to his guns. He made sure that it had a cell modem on it, because he wanted to have that direct connection to customers at a time where that was not the expected thing to do. So just really interesting how he, again, stuck to his beliefs.
And then I think it was Microsoft, right, for a few years, or am I wrong?
I then was out as a VC in a company a firm specializing in spin-outs from larger companies. So if you think about being on the research side of a large company, you're always going to be trying to anticipate which way the company's going to go and try to run projects in advance. Well, sometimes you zig and the company zags. So you may have projects that are successful, very successful technically, but not a good business fit for the company. So New Venture Partners is a firm that specialized in spin-outs. And that was a very kind of interesting activity for me.
And then VMware.
Yeah, so back to, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm trying just to figure what percentage of the white hair you got in the government, what in Intel, what in Amazon, and what in the VC, and what in VMware.
And what part was just genetic?
Yeah.
Let's see. Not too much in VMware. VMware's, I think, been a good ride. The firm, again, is a solid engineering firm.
Tell us what you are doing in VMware.
Technology. Having a lot of fun. It's great to sort of be back. Part of what brought me back to VMware was the feeling of, with mobile and cloud taking off, that, being out in the VC world didn't really give you the chance to be directly connected to the technology. So some of the activities, we actually launched and graduated, so I've been there 4 years. The work in Internet of Things. So, and for each activity, to me, the exciting part is figuring out how can we find a differentiated perspective, right? It's not so brilliant to say you're going to go into IoT. We may have been brilliant when we did it at DARPA 20 years ago. Now it's obvious, so the question is what to do. So there we realized that securing and managing the gateways to IoT and securing and managing the IoT infrastructure is something that was really not being addressed and a great opportunity for a company like VMware. We have activities in blockchain. And they're really exciting if you think about, really, I think of it as distributed ledgers, providing an opportunity to really drive down the barriers to federating enterprises, to getting organizations to work with each other, whether it's through a supply chain, whether it's bank clearinghouses, whatever it is, you have this great opportunity to federate by having a shared ledger, a shared record of what's going on that nobody can tamper with, that's immutable. But we quickly realized that that's the exciting, okay, there's the opportunity, but the Bitcoin blockchain has a lot of problems if that's what you want to do. I mean, if you're really trying to drive this for enterprises and for what I'll call kind of serious and honest players, you don't want to share and say, gee, Yossi, we'll have a ledger of our activities, and by the way, we'll share it with a bunch of other people that are doing money laundering and involved in other sorts of activities, right? This is not really going to work. So we quickly moved towards private blockchain. We realized there that the consensus protocols that were being used were very low throughput, high latency, just the opposite of what you want. And they're really incredibly wasteful. They're deliberately wasteful of energy. And that just actually goes against both VMware's and my own values, which have been very involved with sustainability over the years. So it turned out at VMware, we already had a team of researchers that were experts on distributed consensus protocols. Actually, the core of that team is in Israel. research team in Israel. And some of the researchers here are actually also Israelis.
Can you do some shameless Zionist propaganda of the quality of your Israeli team?
The quality of our Israeli team is, is wonderful. Let's see. We have actually a great mix. We have folks that Itai Abraham and Dalia Malki had been working on consensus protocols for many years. So we had some of the world's experts. They had worked at Microsoft. They moved over to VMware. Dalia was a former faculty member, so she's still here in the US. Itai moved back to Israel so he could take sort of pretty much everything he'd learned about the Valley and also how to drive connections within the company back to Israel with him, start up a new research organization. We've been able to recruit people. I think one of the things we really love is when we get folks, say, new PhDs, and one of my only real, kind of concerns relative to Israel is it does not turn out enough PhDs relative to its own needs. And so that's something that needs to change. But the PhD students that do come out, typically they've already been through the Army, and quite possibly they've spent time developing software. So you get somebody who, on the one hand, has accumulated this research knowledge, but on the other hand, they actually know how to run a project, right? And they actually know how to ship and deliver software and
they
make
learn
deadlines.
it on my tax payments, Good. David,
No. Yeah, I mean, this goes back to we spent time in government. And when I was at DARPA, so you mentioned taxes, so I got to get on this. When I was at DARPA, probably once a month, one of my program managers would come to me with a brilliant idea, which is that DARPA should get shares in all the startups that use the DARPA-funded technologies. And I had to explain to them that at DARPA, we have built-in profit sharing. We get profit sharing from every one of the companies that uses our technologies. We're the government. Sure. So, in that sense.
That's very important, this point. I don't know how many of the people in the audience read or watched on YouTube or read the book or saw the slide of this professor in Stanford, I don't remember his name, who is giving talks about the secret history of Silicon Valley. Anybody who didn't see it should. Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. And the famous president of Stanford of this time, I think Mr. Tarman, he told the researchers, go and do industry, go and build industry, don't pay us any royalties, just do one thing, make it in the neighborhood of Stanford, this will create the ecosystem, and this was in the 50s, and how right he was. And the same thing is, I think, with the Army, because there is a discussion in Israel always about the very same idea.
Right.
So seeding the ecosystem with technology and with ideas is a very worthwhile
right. So going back to your tax concerns, so now we have employees in Israel, we have researchers in Israel, we're paying taxes, they're paying taxes. So, the system is being reimbursed.
Good. We have another 1 minute.
They tell me they're paying a lot of taxes.
This session should have been what you see in the future. Instead of it, we spoke about what you see in the past. Give us in one sentence your view on the future. And remember the old Jewish saying that from the time of the destruction of the second temple, prophecy was given only to the fools. Go ahead.
Well, you're going to get two. I'm sorry about that. I think, one that I'm very positive about is this proactive computing I mentioned before. We're finally turning the corner on. So we've got IoT coming along. We've got machine learning. You see the bit of this in autonomous vehicles. But we're really finally closing the gap between the physical world and the virtual world. That's what IoT really does for us, is it means that information can get to software and get to the virtual world without it having to go through people all the time, without people having to basically do the legwork to move bits around on behalf of the machines, and instead have the machines anticipating the needs of their users and taking actions on their behalf. I think this is really going to open up a ton of new opportunities.
This is one.
This is one. Now, on the other side, a very different space. I know there's sort of been a lot of concerns about fake news. Of course, we also have concerns this week about sort of some of the issues related to Facebook. I think that there's, in technology, we often talk about unintended consequences. So for those of us that were very involved in getting the internet going, there was a period where we were really happy about the notion that on the internet, everybody could have their own press. Everybody could have their voice. And that was a really huge transition from a world of broadcast to a world of narrowcast media. And in retrospect, that was part, in fact, you had cable networks and other things that took us through this. Now, the unintended consequences, we've actually lost our ability, I think, to have a shared understanding of what's going on in the world, and therefore generate shared visions, whether it's as a country, as a society, even within companies, this can be an issue. So I think one of the things, I don't know what it's going to be, but I think we're overdue for a reinvention of media and some new type of media. And I don't know what it's going to be. This is a case where I'm just sort of shooting from the need to have some new type of media, so it's whatever the successor to social networks will be, but something that really allows us to develop shared visions and shared understanding. And I think we need it, and it will happen. Technology will step up and find it.
This was a terrific segue for tomorrow, Fire Chat. David Sable, you heard the issue. I'm having tomorrow a Fire Chat with David Sable, who is the global CEO of YNR, and we will discuss it. David, like always, I can spend hours with you. It's always very interesting. The last thing I need from you, there are here tons of Israelis who are dying to pitch VMware. What is your email address?
It's fine. dtennenhouse@vmware.com.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.